Hey, thanks so much for stopping by. I am getting ready to make one of my favorite summertime ferments, and that is probiotic pickles that stay crisp. So there's a few really key tips to know to make sure that your lacto-fermented probiotic pickles stay nice and crisp. So I'm going to share those with you. I'm really glad that you're here, and I'm going to bring you along as I do this. My cucumbers that I have here are some that I got from the farmer's market. We are growing some, but ours are not quite ready. These are big. I was hoping for smaller pickling cucumbers. Looks like I missed some dirt on this one. I'll have to rewash that. I really like the small cucumbers for pickles, but that's okay. I'm going to actually slice these, so we're going to get dill pickle chips. So dill pickle slices this way. Since these are so massive, you'd only be able to fit like 3 of them in my half-gallon jar. So that's not going to work great. So I'm going to do slicing instead. I did want to show you one of our jars from last summer. I like to make a big bunch of these, lots and lots of half-gallon jars, and fill them with pickles. But you can see how there's lots of small-sized ones in there. That's the ones that I prefer, but that's okay. So when it comes to making probiotic pickles that stay crisp, there's a few different things to know. One is to trim off the blossom end of all your pickles. So I'm just going to go through and do that first. So there's 2 different ends. There's the stem end, where you can see the stem, and then the other end is the blossom end. So the blossom end contains certain enzymes from the blossom that can lead to mushy pickles. So if you trim off that blossom end, that helps prevent mushiness. And then the other thing that you can do is add something to the brine to help keep them crisp. So there's a few different things that you can add. You can add things like grape leaves, oak leaves, black or green tea leaves, bay leaves. All of these contain certain tannins that really help the pickles stay crisp. Another trick is to do what I'm going to do and to add some of the brine or liquid from Bubby's probiotic pickles. For some reason, there's something in this brine that helps homemade pickles stay nice and crisp. So for a quart jar, you can add 1 tablespoon of this brine, or for a half-gallon jar like I'm doing, which would be the same as 2 quarts, you can add 2 tablespoons. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to start by slicing my cucumbers up. I'm going to be removing both ends just because I am slicing. So we'll go through and do that. And then just start slicing these into little rounds. One nice thing is that we like to use our pickles on burgers. And so this way they will be pre-sliced. Right now, using the pickles that we made last year from the whole cucumbers, we always have to take them out and slice them, which is fine. But this way, we will have that already done for us, and that'll be kind of handy. So I'll just add them to my jar as I slice them. You can try to get them to settle down in there, so you can pack as many as you possibly can into one jar. Looks like I'm probably going to have enough for 2 jars, so I'm going to grab another jar. It is important to keep everything super clean when you're fermenting. You don't have to go so far as to use like a mild bleach solution. That's what some people do, but for sure soap and water for everything. Clean cutting board, clean tools, clean hands, clean produce. The only exception for produce is if you knew, like you grew it yourself, or you visited the farm and you knew exactly how it was grown and you were comfortable with getting some of those soil-based organisms into yourself. And then it can be okay to not be too much of a stickler about washing vegetables too well if you know really well how it was grown and you're okay with the soil-based organism aspect. Otherwise, if you're not sure, go ahead and wash it. But yeah, soap and water is good. And then the other thing is choosing organic produce. I've seen personally a big difference. I've had non-organic produce mold before when I was doing everything else right. And that was the only difference, is that it was not organic produce. So since then, I always grow it myself, or make sure that it was whoever grew it, it was grown organically. And that's supposed to be higher nutrient levels anyway, so that's got to be a good thing. But it is pretty interesting because we know that funguses are around to clean up dirty areas. So if something was grown with pesticides, it's just very interesting that the mold fungus situation is more likely to be there, just because it was not organic and there's more chemicals and stuff. So I just think that's fascinating. It's kind of like yeast overgrowth in the body too. It's always going to be there as long as there's toxicity, no matter what you do. Until the body is detoxed and clean, you're not going to be able to get rid of it. But when the toxins leave the body and the body is clean and detoxed, then the yeast can leave. And then you don't have the chronic yeast symptoms anymore. Just very interesting. And of course, one of the ways to support healthy detox is by regularly eating probiotic foods like fermented vegetables and these wonderful pickles. All right, so we want to make sure that these can go down in there far enough that the jars are not going to be too full. These are looking pretty good though. Pretty nice amount. Oh, I am going to need my second fermentation weight, but let's go ahead and add the other things that we need for now. So the next thing that we need is our item that we're using to prevent mushy pickles, which is 2 tablespoons per half-gallon jar of brine from Bubby's fermented pickles. Now you want to make sure that these are Bubby's dill fermented pickles. Don't get the sweet pickles or anything like that, because that won't work. So we add that. Next, we're going to have 2 tablespoons of mustard seed into each half-gallon jar. If you're using a quart, it'll be 1 tablespoon of mustard seeds. I will have the link to my blog post with the full written instructions and printable recipe card linked down in the description, as well as links to the fermentation weights that I'm using and jars, anything else that might be helpful will all be down there. So that was 1 tablespoon for that jar. There we go, 2 tablespoons in each jar. Next we need some peppercorns. We need a teaspoon of whole peppercorns per quart, so that's going to be 2 teaspoons per half-gallon jar. And then a bunch of dill. So I have some fresh dill here, and what I like to do is grab the tops, kind of these flowering tops, and get 2 or 3 or kind of whatever I feel like I'm going to be able to fit pretty well into the jar, and stick that in there for that wonderful dill flavor. Okay, this is looking great. The dill smells so good. Alrighty, and then we also have some garlic that we can add. I like to keep the garlic cloves whole for these, and you can do 1 clove per quart. You can add more if you want to. It's kind of up to you. I'm going to do 2 cloves per half-gallon jar. And these are always so tasty too once the fermentation is done and you get pickled garlic too. My kids always want these, like, oh, where's the garlic? I'd like to have one. See, this one is not peeling as, it's not being as helpful as it could be. Oh, I see, it was a little bit bad. Okay, I'm gonna have to get another one then. Good to watch for that. You don't want to be trying to ferment anything that's got any bad spots on it or starting to spoil or anything, because that's not going to be good. I remember a saying one time, I think it was like a naturopath or somebody said, eat food that will go bad before it goes bad. I guess an exception would be fermented foods because, well, I guess they will go bad eventually, just not as soon as some things. Next, we are going to add our salt. I'm using my nice Baja Gold mineral salt here, which I love. So for every quart, you're going to want 1 tablespoon. So I'm going to do 2 tablespoons per half-gallon jar. I'm getting kind of low on this salt. I'll have to fill in with some pink Himalayan also. There we go. And then I will need my second fermentation weight. Okay, so cucumbers, brine, mustard seed, peppercorn, dill, garlic. All right, double checking my ingredient list to make sure I have everything, and then I'm going to add my fermentation weight. For this type of a ferment, this is very handy, just to make sure that everything stays submerged. And then we're gonna fill these. You can use filtered water or spring water. I'm gonna grab my spring water and fill these up. I will show you a close-up shot too of what the weights look like in the jars with everything in them. But let's add our water and fill them up. Trying to leave about 1 inch of space at the top. I like to try to fill them kind of to the shoulder. The most important thing is that everything is submerged, because usually you're going to get mold anytime something sticks up out of the brine. The exception can be something really small, like maybe a seed or a spice or something like that. Those can oftentimes be okay. But anything that's a vegetable sticking out is probably going to mold. So just try to make sure everything is well submerged. And then I'm going to show you a close-up of what the jars look like. Here's what those little glass fermentation weights look like. Like I said, I'll link them down below. It's kind of hard to see under the water, but. And then there's what they look like all filled up. I just always think those are beautiful. And then when it comes to lids, there are all kinds of fancy fermentation lids that you can spend your money on, of course. But my personal favorite is just the simple canning jar, ring and flat. So the reason why I like these is because you can put them on and then it gives you a gauge. You just tighten them down and then it gives you a gauge, because at first you can easily pop that up and down. As fermentation starts, when it's nice and tight, then you know that much pressure has built up and that the ferment is fermenting nicely. Usually if you fill it just to the shoulder, then that's enough room for the fermentation to happen enough to where when you can't pop it up and down anymore, it's ready to move to the fridge. Now, these ones are a bit more full than that, so I'm gonna know that it's going to do that probably a little bit sooner than I want it to. Then I'd be ready to move it to the fridge. But usually these will be good to ferment on the counter for 3 to 7 days and then move them to the fridge. So if you see it getting really tight very soon and you know that you've filled the jar pretty full, you can just open it a little bit, release some of that pressure, tighten it up again. But it's just nice to have that gauge. Plus it's really tight, it doesn't let anything in. So that's what I like to use. And then once we are storing them long term and using them, then I like to switch to one of these plastic lids, just because it's easier to keep nice and clean and easier to use, all that kind of thing. But for the fermentation process, it is nice to have that gauge that you can check how much pressure has built up. And then just keep in mind that the room temperature comes into play as well. The warmer the room temperature, the faster the microbes are going to be more active and multiplying, and so the quicker the fermentation is going to happen. So like right now in the summertime when it tends to be warmer, this is gonna happen more like 3 days, 3 to 4 days, and they're gonna be ready for the fridge. I may need to loosen the jar since it is so full once or twice within that time period. If it's cooler, it's gonna take longer because they're just not as active at cooler temperatures. And so it's gonna be more like 6 or 7 days before they're ready to move to the fridge. But I'll let these ferment on the counter until I know that they're ready by either what they look like, what they smell like, the lid having built up enough pressure over at least 3 or 4 days. And then at that point, I'll move them to a storage location. Now, the refrigerator is ideal. I don't always have enough refrigerator space for the amount of jars that I make, so I'll usually find another coolish place to store them and keep them there. And that's always worked great. I've been doing that for years. As long as everything stays submerged and the lid is nice and tight, and you check that the water level or brine level is high enough that everything is underneath that level, then I've never had a problem. So, and they stay crisp and delicious for a year or more. It's great. So I hope that you liked this video. If you did like it, it would mean a lot to me if you could give it a thumbs up. It really helps out my channel. Make sure to check out the description box for the link to that blog post with the full written instructions and printable recipe card. If you enjoy videos like this about from scratch cooking, nourishing recipes, simple, slow, intentional living, and what I'm making in my farmhouse kitchen, then make sure to stay tuned as I make more videos for you. Thank you so much for being here and watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.